Thank you, folks. As the credits roll, I wanted to say before this film that one of the beautiful things about this film is that it not only tells us about the past, but makes that important connection to the present, which is part of why we should be seeing these kinds of films and having these kinds of discussions. To moderate our discussion right now, we're very excited to bring up Lynn Sherr. Thank you so much, Lynn, for being here. And she'll be talking to producers of the film, Joe Bender, Caroline Hirsch, and Allison Stern. You all make your way up. And the director and writer of the film, Maxim Pozdorovkin, is here with us as well to answer our questions. Thank you all so much for being here and being a part of this conversation. I hand it over to you.
Caroline?
Thank you for watching,
Great.
everybody.
Thank you. The mics are on, right? Yes. Well, this is my second go-round. It doesn't get any easier, I would like to say. First of all, congratulations. And we didn't have a chance for a proper hand, so thanks to these folks. It's really amazing. So many places to start, and we're going to have time for questions from all of you as well. But let me start with the easiest part first, before we get into the really heavy duty, which is, I know the animator is not here, but why the choice to do it this way? We have all, unfortunately, seen so much of this and lived so much of this. This is a very unusual presentation. Why did you decide to do it this way?
Well, you know, I think one of the challenges in tackling something like the history of this conspiracy theory of a history of anti-Semitism is that to do it any sort of justice, you're dealing with a period before the photographic, before photography and before motion pictures. And it felt like that if you're actually really focusing on present day events as well as kind of speaking about the history through experts, it somehow would feel dusty and it would feel not as alive. And I think that the idea started out in using these first-person memoirs that were left behind by these characters and by these families, and using that as the spine, because so often the kind of insight that they had into the anti-Semitism of their day is so revealing, and they had such foresight, and they're such incredible characters. So I think it was trying to figure out how can we elevate that? How can we elevate those voices, those primary sources, without just showing archive and without anything else? So both
Right.
the decision to use voice actors, as well as the decision to to use that as the sort of the driving force of the narrative, rather than just having experts to comment on it. So I think that was the main.
And the animations are so unusual, and they're so dark. It's not a Disney film. Allison, one of the things you have said to me is that you really were eager to get the protocols out there, to make that something that people had to really pay attention to.
I think it's very important that people, well, I'm sure this audience understands, but when you have nitwits like Kanye West today talking about the protocols of the elders and lecturing on that, I think it's so dangerous that people still believe this crap. I think that when Henry Ford published The Elders in his paper, he influenced a lot, not just of people that worked for Ford, but you look at the whole Midwest, and you look at the people from middle class, lower middle class, and poor who worked for him, and they worked for Cyberling, and they worked for Goodyear, and all of these guys had access to this information via the Dearborn paper. That twisted a lot of people. People believe that. And I think it's important to try and explain to people that it's such stupidity.
Caroline, when did you first learn about the protocols?
Well, after reading the book, Allison and I optioned a book called A Convenient Hatred, The History of Anti-Semitism. which starts in 400 BCE up into present time. This is just a modern take. This is the modern anti-Semitism in the modern world that starts in 1790. But why we got involved was this because we're not Jewish, and we were like, okay, why is this hatred? What is this about? Because we never understood that. So we want to explain to the world how this came about to being. And this is the greatest history lesson, as Trotsky was explaining what had happened here. This is the greatest history lesson that needs to be told to young people. This needs to be told to the NBA. It just needs to be out there. So this is the reason why it was made. They don't teach this in school. It gets breezed over somewhere, as the Holocaust is now getting breezed over. It's not a Holocaust movie. It's about the origins of anti-Semitism and how we could, make a change. Maybe we make a change. It's an animated film. Younger people like to see animation. It should be the history lesson, in schools.
It's like a graphic novel come to life.
Exactly.
You want to jump
Yeah,
in?
and one thing also about the protocols is, from the beginning, we really thought of this as kind of also a work of scholarship. And what amazed me was going deep down the rabbit hole. And for example, if you look up the protocols on Wikipedia, it's still wrong. It still says a version that it was written by the Russian secret police in France after the Dreyfus affair, which has been completely disproven, everything else. So a lot of times these major events have actually kind of been allowed to rest and not solved properly. So for example, the fact that, which seems so monumental, the fact that the guy who started the Kishinev pogrom was actually the guy that we know fairly definitively now was the person that wrote it and first started disseminating them. Like, that fact isn't really public even when you do your basic amount of, superficial Googling.
Why is that, do you think? Go ahead.
I was just gonna add that not to mention that you look at the contemporary conspiracy theories that are just running rampant through the world today. I don't think that there's a great understanding of the kernel of anti-Semitism and the lineage of this story. And so we wanted to go back and show that place the protocols in that context to show that it also hasn't gone away. It's still there in QAnon. It's still there in the sort of the form of the conspiracy theory comes from this specific history, and that was important,
Well, one of the things the film does so horrifyingly, so wonderfully, is to bring the connection between what we're dealing with right now in terms of truth and the lack of it, and the lack of the ability to find it now and then. The sense of an alternate history is just terrifying, but it's so clear that it was there. I do want to talk more about that, but before we do that, I wonder if any one of you has figured out what anti-Semitism really is. Is it, why does it exist? What's your conclusion from all of this? Go ahead, Allison.
Oh, I'm kidding.
Yeah, Caroline?
It's man's paranoia. That's what it is. It's being just jealous of the next person. And that's what it was. I think if you go back to 400 BCE, the first anti-Semitic action with the Egyptian, in Alexandria Island, somewhere on the Nile, it was about Jews were praying to one God. Why did Jews pray to one God when we have all of these pagans that we pray to? And that was the most defying thing that's where it started. Then helped by the Catholic Church and over time and every other lie that came about. But it was about one man saying, "You're different than me."
Okay, so we're reducing it to, so it's about being different. It's about jealousy.
I'll also add, one of the questions that I kept on kind of bumping my head against is that a lot of times if you ask why the Jews, you're almost accepting the premise of anti-Semite. And I think that what you see in history is that a lot of times when powerful people felt their grip on power faltering, and they were losing the kind of power that they had before, Jews became the convenient scapegoat for many, and this is what we see over and over again. And a lot of the tropes that we now associate with xenophobia, with kind of immigrants, all of those really came in response to the Jewish population moving from the Pale of Settlement after that first wave of pogroms and entering Europe. So I feel like that a lot of times, yes, it's all the things that Allison and Carolyn were just saying, but it's also often people who had been losing power desperately and paranoically trying to hold on to that power and looking for a scapegoat, and we know that scapegoating works.
And how do we get from that to conspiracy? How does conspiracy foment all this? Where does it come from? And why are we seeing so much of it today in a way that feels so similar to everything that was in the film?
Yeah, well, this is the sort of the turn that we were trying to address with this the shift from anti-Judaism to anti-Semitism, which begins in this kind of right-wing reaction after the French Revolution, saying, how could we possibly have lost our power? As Max is saying, when people are feel there's this kind of threat to the established power structure, and this series of writers kind of bootstrap the notion of conspiracy of shadowy forces behind the scenes working to undermine everything that is considered the hereditary right by the ruling class. And so and it sort of evolves from there, and these fits and starts. The story ping-pongs between these different writers, evolving at every turn. But that I think is the form that, because these things develop together, this modern anti-Semitism in the form of the conspiracy theory, that's what's still very much with us in across all of these different kind of topic areas.
Has it occurred to you, by the way, to update with the Tree of Life guy?
Yeah, but he was just convicted.
Just convicted.
Yeah, but I, from the beginning, I had this, all conspiracy theories, whether it's chemtrails, the moon landing was fake, all of them, they all share this kernel. And the kernel is that there's some secret group that's sort of manipulating, hiding the truth, creating an alternative reality, and then selling that reality to naive people everywhere. And every single conspiracy theory, so from the beginning, it was, where does this idea come from in general, this idea of this kind of secret behind the scenes? And it really does start with the French Revolution. Initially, it has nothing to do with Jews, and then very quickly, Jews are attached to it for all the reasons that we sort of show in the film, and then that becomes really the bedrock of all kind of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories in general.
So it's really the lowest person on the totem pole at the moment that somebody is looking for somebody to blame something on.
Exactly.
You know what I find amazing is that if you go to Amazon, you can buy the Protocols of the Elders in every way imaginable. I have it in comic book form. I have it now in the whole book. I have it in graphic novel form. I mean, I'm probably being looked at by the federal government. I have so many copies. But I find it amazing that all this crap is out there just so easily accessible.
You've got a quote in there. I wrote it down during this screening, and I think it was from Dreyfus, from the wife. Is she the one that says, an angry mob accepts anything? Yeah. And I was so taken, particularly at the end where you have the montage of, I believe I saw a little Fox News head on there of what's going on today and compared to then. An angry mob will accept anything, that it is so easy to sway. I mean, that's crowd psychology 101, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was from one of the Lucy Dreyfus's letters. It was from the Dreyfus correspondence, and I mean, absolutely diagnosing the problem. We still see it. You're right.
What's the status, or what's the feeling about Dreyfus in France today? I don't know the answer to that. Do you?
Well,
Go ahead, Joe.
we actually, that was one of the shocking things that that Michel Dreyfus, who is a historian, and is very much in tune.
What is he a
Great-grandson?
great-grandson?
That's right. Yeah, and so he's a historian and has actually written a number of books on anti-Semitism in France, and was just I've lived in France for a number of years and know that anti-Semitism in various forms is very much still a hot topic there, but the trends that he was describing in terms of also like this kind of questioning of Dreyfus's innocence becoming once again a topic that in the press. So, after the many years of the Dreyfus affair, which was the main topic of the scandal that rocked France for decades, Dreyfus's innocence was proven, and then for many decades after that, it was considered verboten. It was not acceptable to question that publicly, but Michel was telling us that once again you're starting to see in the right-wing press this kind of calling into question of Dreyfus,
Calling him a famous traitor.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's very
I
telling.
think even the BBC referred to him as an alleged traitor. I think that in general, it's such a bad time for history and historical knowledge right now.
It's a bad time for truth.
Yes.
Truth is the thing that is the problem right now.
But
We
there's
can't
also
seem
just
to-
a lot of sloppy journalism that's involved, and with things like this, they gain traction. And again, the BBC should not be referring to him, even as an alleged traitor.
You cover a lot of territory in this, and as you point out, you're not starting in 400 BCE. You're starting in essentially the modern world. What does it kill you that you couldn't put in? What did you really want to include? And because you were doing an hour-and-a-half documentary, you just couldn't put it all in.
I'd like to start from the beginning if anybody here has 20 or 30 million bucks to hand, But, I mean, this has been going on for a couple thousand years, and but you have to pick your battles.
How about Maxie? Come on, you're the director.
I think that, we did a lot of kind of work and research on antiquity and ancient anti-Semitism. The difficulty becomes is that there's so few primary sources that you could really rely on and then really make it in the same way that we wanted to make the rest of the film. So I think that in addition to obviously not having any visuals, not having any photography, even very few paintings or anything else, and then, obviously the sort of the Christian backbone of anti-Semitism is something that, we address it a little bit with Dreyfus in the courtroom, where you sort of see how Christianity was used to really kind of cudgel and beat him down and to scapegoat him even more.
as it is today.
Yeah, as it is today. So, I mean, I think that giving more of that religious frame, but it's just so hard to do because once you're dealing with, the history of the Gospels, and then, it's the Gospel of John that really was the most anti-Semitic one, but it almost becomes a form of textual analysis rather than a film.
When we get that $20 million, Allison will do the rest of it. Let's hear, I think we have some, a microphone. Microphones can move around if we have some questions from the audience. You can direct it to someone in particular or not. Go ahead.
I found this film to be very powerful, and I think it's a wonderful educational tool. And I was wondering if this could be distributed to various departments of education throughout the country to be shown to young people to teach them about the horrors of anti-Semitism. And by the way, I congratulate you all for this wonderful film.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
One of our partners on the film, Jewish Story Partners, kind of awarded us a grant recently, so they're going to do, I think, around 200 screenings in educational screenings.
Can you tell who Jewish Story Partners?
Jewish Story Partners is an organization that they gave us a couple of grants for the film. I think it's Steven Spielberg's sister.
No, it's Steven Spielberg and his wife, Kate, and it's Roberta Grossman who started this, and it's a way to tell Jewish stories. And they, early on in the making of the movie, gave a large grant to the production to see this through. And now they've come back to us with an educational program that they want to take it out around the country. So we're just discussing where we're going with that with them.
Exciting.
But yeah, our intent is really to get young kids, again, because the historical ignorance is so deep, especially in the younger generations, that actually doing something that tries to scaffold history and tries to scaffold an idea over several centuries and see the way that it evolves and percolates.
Just before we go to the audience again, it's not screening anywhere or streaming anywhere. Is that correct? It's not on.
Not yet.
It's not distributed
Not
yet.
distributed yet. Okay, great.
Hi. So,
Yes.
as a child of Holocaust survivors, born in Israel, who always knew who I am the minute I saw 48749 tattooed on my mother's arm, and who has read everything about the Holocaust, has seen every play that I could see, including the one about John Karski recently, and Leopoldstadt saw it twice. You know, every film. I have to tell you that I'm still shaking. It was very hard for me to watch this for some reason, and though I wouldn't have been able to foretell it, seeing it in this context, in this medium, was incredibly, incredibly powerful. I found it hard to watch because it pinpoints the origins and where the horrors, how the horrors evolved, and I want to commend you on an incredible job.
Thank you. Thank you. High praise indeed.
And you know, one of the things with animation was also, I think we were looking for some other emotional avenue that we could address this topic with, because I feel like there's so much done on this topic, on this material, and it's done in a certain way where even if it's good, it becomes formulaic and it becomes a little bit old and it stops resonating in the same way. So I think that the idea of, again, using the primary sources and then having faces, having actors, you know, having these incredible actors do the voice work is a way to kind of bring back some of that emotion and some of that present tense. So, but thank you for your comment.
Robert?
First, I must say it is so chilling, so powerfully presented. And with all that I knew about this period, I learned so much more watching this. So it really, congratulations, you really elevated the discussion enormously. I thought it was particularly powerful watching you bookend it with the individual, the animation of the person in front of all the computer screens. It really brings it very current and very real. I just wanted to suggest, in addition to sharing it in schools, it's a very powerful film that should be presented in front of municipal governments, state legislatures, and Congress especially. So I hope you'll be able to play a role
We're
with
still
that.
waiting for that White House screening,
Yeah,
which we're still working on.
But before you get the White House screening, I still would look at state legislatures, local governments, and a congressional screening too. It's very important to show.
And you know, with just a comment on the present day connection, is that one of the other things that was so shocking is that when we were looking at sort of the slew of recent anti-Semitic attacks in the last 5 years, how many times, almost all of them, the lunatics behind them were believed in some version of this sort of Jews being in secret cahoots, secret government, etc. And that was really kind of a powerful impetus for us, that story kept on repeating in different versions, whether it's kind of a crazy replacement theory that Byron Bowers believed or some other version of it, but it kept on repeating over and over again.
But what Robert said is so interesting, the idea of state legislatures, which is, among other things, where a lot of the action is in our country right now. It's a great idea. Yes, from the audience.
Okay, a couple of things. Number one, Wikipedia has the option for people to change the scholarship in it. So I just want to state that, because if things in there are inaccurate, there is an opportunity to change it. Secondly, I very much enjoyed the film. Thirdly, here's my question, something that has struck me with this, and by saying this, I do not mean to take away at all from the issue of anti-Semitism, but the parallels to critical race theory is what's going through my mind. And while I recognize that these forms of racism are different, it's still racism. And so I'm wondering if you could just comment on that, please.
Well, I think that my comment was when there was that controversy over Whoopi Goldberg saying that idiotic thing on The View, if you remember. I think, while we were working on this, the whole idea of kind of applying race in this way starts with this issue. It's really when the pseudoscience was applied to the Jews that essentially race essentialism was born. I'm not sure if that gets to what you were saying, but This was what, about a year, maybe about a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, where she was saying, she said something along the lines that, yeah, and exactly, and the whole idea was that all the sort of the race theory that was coming out of the conservative circles in Germany in the 19th century was differentiating the Jews as non-white in this way. So all of our ideas about race and racism really comes from that. The subjugation of black races and other races as inferior also was all written into that intellectual tradition, intellectual in quotes, but so I think that the parallels are, there's a lot to learn. Like I said, I think that so much of kind of a xenophobia we notice, all the same tropes are there. When that first wave of Jewish immigrants came to Germany, immediately they were blamed for, this is one of the things that we had in an earlier cut of the film, but we had to trim down. They were blamed for the cholera epidemic immediately, just because they, just like the way that we blame immigrants for various ills.
It's all about the other. It's all about finding somebody or something that is different and is the other, which is the where it all the nexus where it all comes together. Yeah.
And also there's this kind of feeling of the I think a lot of the sort of the furor around critical race theory and all that kind of has to do also, there's an element of feeling the culture slipping through, some people feeling that the culture is slipping through their fingers or something like that, which really tracks with what these authors in 19th century France were feeling as well, that there's change afoot, the tectonic plates of history are shifting,
and I'm going to be replaced.
I don't like it.
They're being allowed into the military.
Yeah, I'm going to be replaced is really what it comes down to. We have more back there. Yeah,
We're going to take 2 more questions.
Hi. First of all, congratulations to all of you. I share so many of the thoughts that people have shared this evening, particularly that it was uncomfortable to watch the movie in a very powerful way. But what struck me, as you all have been describing what you did and why you did it and the roots of what you've done, are a couple of simple things. First of all, words matter. That's such a basic concept, but you brought that home very powerfully in your movie. But when you talk about the graphic novel, in today's age with all the multimedia interactive things, have you thought about taking this and transforming it into some sort of interactive graphic novel where people could drill down more deeply? Because there was so much in that movie, and it was uncomfortable, and it was heavy, as it should be, but so much more information to be learned about every topic you touched on.
It would be a great project. However,
we haven't gotten there yet. We just haven't gotten there yet. So, but Allison has been a proponent of that from the beginning.
one more. You said
We have 1 more up on top.
what I want to say is not a comment about the film, which I thought was extraordinary, and I hope it's widely distributed, but it was a comment that came from the stage where you raised the question of where was the beginning of conspiracy theories and of anti-Semitism, and that became very fuzzy. But it seems to me that in Western history, in European history, the Jews, from the time that they were kicked out of the Middle East, were the people who were a nation and retained their identity as a group, but they didn't have land. So when anything went wrong in any country in Europe, when anything went wrong, they were scapegoated, and they couldn't defend themselves.
it's interesting.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely right. And I think that for us, that shift from anti-Judaism to sort of modern anti-Semitism happens when that kind of ancient hatred of Jews that had existed is married to this kind of conspirological thinking that starts out in response to the French Revolution. And then
I want to say that I think the greatest compliment that you've been paid here tonight which is the greatest compliment that any reporter can ever be paid, is that it made her uncomfortable. And making people uncomfortable is at getting at the truth. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Folks, before you leave, two important questions. One, where can people find out more? What should they be doing next? And two, will this screen in Europe? Is there a plan for that?
Yes, there's a screening in Brussels, and then, yeah, I think there's a...
It's on the festival circuit right now, so it's around the country. It's going around the country.
And where should people, what should they be doing next? What should our audiences?
We should build a website.
Just tell the next person that you saw this great documentary.
Spread the word.
Spread the word.
Spread the word.
Spread the word.
Thank you all very much. You're a wonderful audience. Thank you.
Thank you,
You were
folks.
great.
Thank you all. Thank you for being here, and thank you for bringing this to us.